here we are with Johna Johnson, the author of 2 books, Blood, Sweat, Leather and Tears, set around the mid-late 70s and his time following Adam and the Antz. Nice to meet you, Johna.
Morning, how you doing?
I'm doing well. So kind of like when I've read the first book, I've got the second book, so I haven't started reading it yet. But you were quite young when punk first came about.
I just left school. I left school in April 1977. And my introduction to punk rock was at Butlins, Skegness. And we were quite poor, so as a family at that time, because my dad wanted to own his own house and not rent. We had very little money. What we used to do, we used to go on holiday every year, but we used to go to Butlins because they used to have this. They used to open early in the season, pretty much when it was still winter. For people who couldn't afford to go when the sun was out, we used to go at the end of winter. So you're talking probably March, where it's still kind of wintry, but it was a lot cheaper. So we went to Butlins, Skegness, in 1977. I always thought of Butlins like a concentration camp. You could never get out of the place, you know, because I was still a child, basically. You were pretty much locked in. Unless you were going out with your parents, you were stuck in there. Anyway, I met this guy from Bradford called Ian James. And I can't remember, it was during the day. I was mulling about and we got talking. And he says, we found out we were both from Bradford. And I says, what do you do? He says, I also DJ as well. He had a job during the day, but he DJ'd at night. And he was telling me about punk rock. He says, come down tonight and I'll play some records. So I went down there at night. And there were a few people jumping about to kind of, you know, pop records of the time. And Ian, and there was a couple from Peterborough. And they just looked fantastic. They had all the homemade punk gear on it, you know, which would have been pretty basic at that time. Kind of combination of safety pins, makeup all over the face, scraggly hair, and, you know, and homemade T-shirts with zips on and stuff like that. And at that point, there was very few punk records. I think there was I don't even think there were half a dozen. There were Anarchy in the UK, The Damned, Stranglers probably had a single out. I think The Boys had a single out as well. And there were probably a couple of other ones. I can't remember what. Anyway, at some point in the evening, when it's time to play these punk records, he kind of signalled me that it was going to happen. And the first one was The Damned. And as soon as I heard that opening bar, is she really going out with him? And then the drums kicked in. I just went, oh, this is it. And I just jumped up and down. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't even sure I was aware of punk rock at that point. And I just kind of followed what they were doing. And they were like just jumping around all over. And so I just jumped around with them. And I just thought, this is fantastic. And they played about 4 or 5 records and that were it, done. And we met afterwards, once the DJ had finished, and they asked me what I thought. I thought it was fantastic, particularly the Damned record. Just that opening line, as soon as the drums kicked in. And that was it. As soon as I got back off my holidays, hair were cut off, all my trousers were taken in. You know, I started stenciling T-shirts and stuff like that, much to my mum and dad's dismay, wondered what the hell I was. And they kept trying to talk me out of it, but I just wouldn't have it. We started, because I didn't want to upset them, and it was clearly upset. I used to hide my clothes in a bag outside, and then I'd get changed outside in my mate's garage. And that was the introducer. And then Ian, after that holiday season, Ian actually came back to Bradford, and we became firm friends. He ended up being a mod in '78, which I could never understand. I mean, I remember having the conversation with these little mods. And they were going, we want to do something new. I said, well, it's not new, is it? His mod's new. It's been, it was out in the 60s. There's nothing new about mods. But anyway, they hung around with the punks and they were all great friends. But that was my introduction to punk rock. And I went back to school and we got kicked out of school and stuff for doing that. Once we left school, it was, you know, I mean, there was no real punk scene at that point in Bradford. The punks, there was a few punks in '76. We used to go to a place called The Sun, which is now a gay bar. I'm not sure it was a gay bar back then. And it got trashed by the Teddy Boys. And there was a lad at the bottom of our street called Steve who was hospitalised for quite a while. And it didn't come out for about 3 years after that. It had a really bad effect on him. So they killed the scene and we didn't really have an home. Nobody really knew each other. But as the summer progressed, we had the Damned in the adverts played and the Lurkers played at the uni. and little by little more people turned up, and we started forging links. And then round about September time, we were told about a place called Queen's Hall, or MAC as it was known, which was a student union for the college. And it was an heavy rock disco. So we used to, but everyone, all the outsiders used to go down there. So we went down there, and it was great. It was 33p for a pint of lager. I don't know why I remember that, but so we'd take a couple of quid out, but as they play 5 punk records throughout at some point in the evening, and it was great. And that's how punk rock started. And we adopted a pub around the corner called the Mamble, which became our home, and let us put all our own punk records on the jukebox. In 1977, there was probably about 30 of us. By 1978, there was probably about 100, 150 of us. You know, so it blossomed quite quickly. But it was great days to be alive as a young kid.
See, I was in '77. I was 10, and I was living in just outside Mansfield in Sutton and Ashfield. And I remember '77, summer '77, being all about Elvis and Way Down. You know, and it was slowly, probably 78 when I started to see punks walking around the street. But at the age of 10, they all looked a bit strange, a bit weird, you know. And then
there weren't many punks about, really. I don't think. I mean, there were probably a few more in Leeds because they had a bigger university and all that lot. But yeah, I mean, when we used to see other punks in other towns, because we were quite blessed in a way living in Bradford, because we had Leeds on one side, Halifax on the other side, Huddersfield on another side, Keighley on another side, and they all had punk venues. So you know, there were plenty of venues. The hardest bit was getting back because there was no bus. Everything finished at 10:30. There was no late. Leeds was easy because they had a milk train that came back at 3 o'clock in the morning. But you know, we had plenty of choice, and every band played around there at some point. So you know, you could see it blossoming. But when we met punks from other places, we were just so happy to see somebody else that looked like us, because you know, it was the time. I clearly remember a little old lady attacking me with a umbrella, saying, "Get back to where you come from." I'm going, "From Bradford, you silly old biddy." But it kind of, I started to identify what it might be like even though I grew up in a multicultural society. On my street alone, there were Eastern Europeans, Asians, black people. There were all sorts. You know, so I was used to being around them, but I never kind of understood what it might be like to be an immigrant in this country until I became a punk rocker. And then when you're walking down the street, and you could see the fear in people's eyes, or the shock, or whatever, or the hatred, or whatever. And I remember thinking one day, this is what it must be like for the, you know, these people that come and live in a country that's alien to them. We're getting treated like we're aliens. You know, get back to where you come from. This was one of my neighbours. Yeah. Who had grown up, a little old lady who lived 2 doors away from me. She's actually known me since. She's going, "What the bloody hell are you these days? Get back to where you come from." Hits me with a bloody brolly.
So which was the first punk band you went to see live then?
I think it was the Lurkers and the Crabs at the Great Hall at University. I think it was around about, I can't remember, May 77 or something. And I always like that Shadow track. They might have even given it out at that gig. I can't remember. They didn't usually put many gigs on at the Great Hall. I think only gigs I can remember seeing there was Gary Glitter played there once, and the Lurker. I can't remember any of the gigs that played. I'm sure Penetration played there. They usually played the communal building if they played the uni, because it was a lot bigger room. Well, actually, was it? But yeah, the Lurkers. I think the second one was the Damned and the Adverts at George's Hall. You know, all the teddy boys are outside getting ready to kill us, like they usually do. I mean, Bradford was full of Teds in 1977. I mean, they actually used to take coaches to London to fight the punks. You know, there were like 20 or 30 of us. We just left school. A lot of them were still at school. You know, and I interviewed the leader of the Teds not so long ago. And after, what is it, we're now 50 years ago, he says, "Do you know something? I've just realised that when we used to chase you lot around town," he says, we were like in our late 30s, and you were school kids." I says, "Exactly." I said, "You were just bullying us." I remember one incident with this teddy bear, because they used to hate the fact that we wore drape suits and brothel creepers. That's why they hated us. They weren't interested in the music at all. But a lot of punks wore drape, because everyone had family members who had teddy boys in the families, or old Teds who didn't wear them anymore. So they'd pass them down and give them to the your nephews and cousins and stuff like that. So they put safety pins in them. And I remember I got followed around town by a family of teddy boys. They were like a teddy boy's wife and 2 kids. And he was pushing his pram. Everywhere, Bradford's in a valley, so everything's on hills.
Yeah.
So he's pushing his pram up this old cobbled street and he's struggling with it. And he's shouting at the street, "You punk bastard, you're wearing our clothes," and spitting. As he's saying spitting, he's actually spitting at me. And they're following me up the street to our catch, and I'm just totally ignoring them. After a while, I turned around and his 2 sons were there, which were about 10-year-old in the little drape suits. And the dad had got the pram stuck in the cobbles. He was halfway down the street. And the little teddy boys looked behind. I see the dad were half down the street. And I sort of looked at him, thinking, what are you going to do? And they got a bit embarrassed then and walked off back down to the dad. But we had quite a lot of incidents with Teds in '77. They were pretty much our nemesis. Because of my connection to football at Leeds United, and I knew all the City fans, we never really got much trouble off the normal people, because I kind of knew them via football. But Teds were but by '78 there was a lot more of us, and we could look after ourselves a bit better.
So which was the first band, the first punk band from Bradford that formed?
First punk band would have been, I'm not sure whether this is contact. Me and Tim Calvin, an old friend of mine, and Aki's brother, Aki Nawaz's brother, we formed a punk band called Plastic Bucket and the Abortions. I came up with a name. It sounded quite shocking. It sounds even worse now when I mentioned it. The idea, we didn't do it because we wanted to be musicians. I remember us going to a gig in Leeds. I can't remember who were playing, but there was loads of fantastic looking punk girls, and they were all over, the singer and rest of the band. And I think Tim said, I love that. Let's start a punk band. So I said, we need a name, and we need to. So we actually got to the point where we had some rehearsals. I think Aki he booked the church next door to their house on Legram's Lane. I don't know where the instruments came from, because we didn't have it. But we turned up at this rehearsal, and there were loads of instruments there. We didn't have a clue how to play, even though my dad was a guitarist. And we just tapped around and banged around. And so that's all I remember. I don't know if we were the first, possibly. Anyway, we had 2 or 3 rehearsals. Aki seems to think we had a gig, but I don't remember us having any songs. But we did it to pull the birds. We did it for the wrong reason, really. And we designed these shirts with Plastic Bucket and the Abortions on the back in big red letters, which, the women hated it. So it actually had a reverse effect on ladies. God knows where I got that name from, Plastic Bucket and the Abortions. God almighty. I suppose it's a shocking punk name. So it kind of failed what we were trying to do, but I think Aki, it must have done something to Aki possibly, because he went out and made a proper band.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure who came first. Though. I think the Negatives were the first band. I can clearly remember a Sunday at the Royal Standard, and the stage was full of instruments, and whoever was supposed to play had pulled out. So everyone had turned up, and for whatever reason, people just jumped up on stage and started playing instruments or pretending to play. And Dave Wilcox, the singer, jumped up, and there was a live mic, and he started singing to something. And Bob Robinson and Pete were in the audience, and the clock Dave, obviously, he looked like a Sid Vicious type character, plenty of charisma. So they asked him if he wanted to form a band, and that started the Negatives. I think Violation, which was Aki's band, came slightly after. I could be wrong, but I think it was slightly after. We also had the birth of New Model Army at that point. Yeah. We used to hang around Justin and Jules' house in New Cross. And that was always entertaining. I'd known Jules since 1977 when she came to Bradford. She was at university. She used to go to Max Queen's Hall 1977, but she wasn't a punk then. She was a more of a rock lady, and she used to be married to a guy called Ken, who later became a Satan slave. But we used to go around, and I remember Justin was I really liked Justin. I'm not sure. I think his favourite bands was Bruce Springsteen and the Ruts. I'm not sure whether he would call himself a punk. He certainly loved the punk ethics and the attitudes of punk rock. So he certainly took something from punk rock, but he kind of he was more open to more different types of music than we were at that particular time. At that time, I was pretty narrow-minded. I wouldn't entertain anything that wasn't punk rock. I'd stop listening to David Bowie and Pink Floyd, which is what I grew up with. I'd deem them pointless as soon as I heard Sex Pistols. About no need to revisit that ever again. And it's only later that I realised how in that punk years how narrow-minded it actually became musically.
Yeah,
to my detriment. It wasn't until sort of 79, 80 when everyone ended up on top of the flops that I started to listen to loads of new stuff, particularly the American punk stuff, which I really loved. I didn't know anything about it initially. And that's when my mind started opening up to loads of different types of music.
Yeah. So it's quite pivotal in the first book is your first trip to London and when you go into Sex. Did that actually happen?
The thing with the book is, I think that I wish at the first Adam and the Antz gig, the Man in the Moon, there was nobody there. Very few people were there. There was about 20 people. But because it all got a bit confused with the Pulp Fiction tag, because they wanted to do Pulp Fiction and mainly they wanted me to do a factual version, but in a novel kind of way. And because they said that it was fictional, it felt I could be a bit more flexible with the truth, I suppose. I was allowed to, and everyone would have loved to have been at the Man in the Moon gig, so that's why I started it there. But by doing that, I think it's confused people more, because anybody who knows anything about the Antz would realise, or should realise, that there was nobody actually at that Man in the Moon gig. But the rest of the stuff actually happened, but it was another gig. I'd arranged to meet my friend in London, and it wasn't the X-Ray Specs, it was the Antz was supporting the Banshees. I can't even remember where it was. And I got there late and I walked in and getting ready for the Banshees, and my mate was just going mad about Adam and the Antz. And I'm going, it sounds like I've missed the best band in the world here. And he completely forgot about the Banshees. And he just, you've got to what? And because he was a lot older than us in Bradford, he was a hell of a character. He was about 5 or 6 years older than us. And so we kind of looked up to him. He was a big black lad with a skunk haircut. And he had his own gang. I think he was a biker before punk came out. And I suppose I took notice. What he was translating to me, it just felt. I got back from that gig, and suddenly I'm like looking at. I've got to find out who this Adam and the Antz are. So I actually went to the Adam and the Antz gig and missed the first Antz gig. But I wanted to start at the Man in the Moon because we'd have all loved to have been there. But I think it's kind of confused the issue slightly.
Yeah.
But I wish in retrospect, I wish I had started it from especially if you look at the introductions in the book, there's Popey and all them, like actually telling you the first Adam and the Antz gig they went to, the Marquee, October the 4th, 1977, when the Antz supported the Buzzcocks. So, that's when they started going. So, but to try and fit the criteria of the book company, I started it at that, and I had to create a couple of fictional episodes in the book to fill the sex, drugs, and rock and roll angle, I suppose. Yeah.
So, because what was special about Adam and the Antz at that point for you? Because definitely the Antz had a fanatical following.
They were just, going to Adam and the Antz. I'd seen, by the time I saw Adam and the Antz, I'd seen a hell of a lot of punk bands by that point. But the Adam and the Antz experience was completely different to every other punk, even including Sex Pistols. Nothing ever came close to it. How the people danced, how people looked, the energy of the band, and everything. It was overwhelming. It was exciting and scary in equal measure. It's hard to describe. It's almost like being taken over. You're not in control of yourself. I remember sitting on a bus once and just listening to Adam and the Antz songs. Would I have had headphones then? I think I probably did, but it'd have been them big, massive, ones. And I just remember, I'm sat on a bus listening to Adam and the Antz, and I'm just like, it feels like I'm experiencing it, sat in the seat looking out the window, and I can feel all my body tense up and all the aggression in my head. And if somebody would have started on me or on that bus while I was doing, I could, I could probably react in quite a negative way. It's so, you've got to be there, and I suppose you've got to catch the buzz. There's been plenty of people, friends who've been to Adam and the Antz and just thought, well, I thought they were shit. Not everybody got it.
Yeah.
But, there were rooms, people used to turn up just to watch people dancing to Adam and the Antz. When you're watching people rolling about on the floor looking like they're having a nervous breakdown, it looks mental.
Yeah.
It's not, and then you look at Adam jumping up and down on stage like a madman. I mean, nobody was aware of his mental illness at that point, and I'm just wondering whether we were subconsciously picking up on that and kind of responding in a kind of person having a kind of mental breakdown to the music.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure Adam would have been aware. I don't know. But I mean, a lot of things are subconscious in his art. We sort of react to things without actually thinking of them. And, like I say, with Adam's mental health, maybe we were all just kind of reacting to the underlying mental health issues of Adam and how he was responding to his own music and that. But it felt like he was in some kind of a mental ward at times, I mean, a lot of little kids who, there were no big street fighters. When you're in a gig and getting confronted by skinheads, the music actually gave us strength and confidence to confront the people who were trying to, and that's strange in itself. Like I say, there were certain songs that had triggered off a response, like Falling, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Red Scab, and the other one, Kick, and stuff like that. And there were certain songs that had just triggered a violent response if we were getting met by violence.
Yeah.
It could be kicking off, and Never Trust a Man with Egg on His Face to be playing, and no one will do it. And then suddenly he'll just go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, and everyone just turns around and stings into everybody. The whole thing was strange, and it was sad when it all went.
Because I remember being round Justin Simmons' house probably when I was 12 or 13, and he'd just seen Adam and the Antz the night before, and he was telling me how amazing the band were, and I didn't get it because I was 12 or 13 at the time,
You weren't a kid, because I spoke to Justin about it. Actually, he was the first Antz fan.
Yeah.
He was the very first Antz fan. Like, if you read in Martin Pope's introductory in the book, he's saying when he first went, the only person down the front was Justin, throwing himself about, and they wanted to be throwing themselves about with him. And I remember Justin was telling me, he said he was babysitting for somebody. I think it might have been the Roxy Club, I'm not sure, his first gig. He was babysitting for someone, and then he went down the Roxy afterwards, and Adam and the Antz were playing, and he said that was my band. Justin stopped going, I think, sometime in '78, and started following the Lurkers. Moved on to the Lurkers. I don't know why he stopped going. Or you weren't the person who were babysitting for, were you?
No, I was living in Scotland, I think, at that point.
Were Justin in Scotland?
No, my dad went to college with Justin's mum and dad.
Oh, right. Okay.
So whenever we came to London, well, generally, if we came to London, we'd call into his house for my mum and dad to see his mum and dad. Right. And I think from memory, he had a brother and a couple of sisters, so. Right. And I remember having my first ever large pizza, which must have been about 18 inches or something like that. And that must have been 78 or 79, something like that. And just like that was my first ever big pizza, sharing pizza.
Right. See, that's similar to my kebab story in London, you see. So where are you from originally?
Middlesbrough.
I was wondering where the Middlesbrough thing came in. You don't sound like a Middlesbrough lad.
We moved away when I was 6 to Nottinghamshire. So we lived in Sutton and Ashfield and then moved to Scotland in '78. And for me, that's when, as soon as I moved to Scotland, it was like everybody, all the kids of my age were into punk rock.
Right.
It was a place called Livingston, and Livingston had quite a reputation for punk, and still has. And it was just ordinary lads had written Sham 69 or The Clash on a t-shirt and had a bit of a rip on it. Maybe put some zips onto trousers. So it was all very much DIY. There wasn't a lot of sex or boy
No.
fashion going on up there. You know, it was really
Yeah.
do it yourself, and suddenly you're in with people the same age as you. You get attracted to it because you know you're in a new environment, you know, and you want to be part of that environment. But it was also for me, 78. It was quite fascinating, you know. It kind of like gave me a voice, I suppose.
Well, I think that's what it did for a lot of people. I mean, you know, we didn't have our lives were pretty much mapped out for us until punk rock came along. You know,
Yeah.
you'd be following your dad to whatever your dad job, you were following them down at Mill on End of Street or whatever. You know, suddenly we've got the band singing that I Want to Be Me and all these other things, Alec in the UK, and suddenly you felt I can be whatever I want to be.
Yeah.
You know, we were still young and still a bit naive, but it set the process in motion for people to become who they want. And you know, you didn't have to. I remember seeing the Slits once, and they couldn't play. They just got on stage and just made a racket. And I just remember sitting there laughing. How can you get on stage like and play? But everyone loved them and everyone jumped on stage. And it gave people the confidence for other people to get on that stage and do it. It wasn't about having so much ability. It was just about connecting with other kids and stuff, I think.
Yeah. Obviously, Jordan has just passed away.
Yeah.
Do you remember when you first met Jordan?
I can't remember the first time I met. The one incident that stands out is when I went in the shop and she let me off with a quid. And I had a leather jacket on, and my mate had just painted Juanito the Bandito on it. And she went, "Oh, I really like your jacket." And we got talking. And I'd kind of met her a couple of times before, briefly. This was the first time I think I'd talked to her about anything substantial. The shop was empty. There was only me in it. So I managed to talk for a bit. She told me about her relatives in Yorkshire and stuff like that a lot. And I had quite a bit of money on me, but I didn't want to break into it. So I kind of said, "Oh, I'm pretending to be looking for another quid in my pocket." And she was, "What's wrong?" I said, "Oh, I'm a pound short." She went, "Oh, but I reminded her about it later on when we all kind of reconnected again. And she went, "Oh, can I have that quid back now?" She was lovely with Jordan. I was hoping to, when I interviewed her in Ebden Bridge, we had such a good night. I was hoping to do that more, but then not so long after, I ended up with this head situation, which kind of curtailed me getting out of Bradford so much. And you know, now that opportunity's gone, I were hoping to do more interviews with her. And you know, all my old friends, they're all hanging out again in London. All people I used to knock about with Jordan, and you know, a lot of the Antz crew have been out. Well, I started reconnecting with all them guys in 2005 when I first got a computer, and then suddenly everybody from my past on the computer. I'm going, bloody hell, man! I haven't seen you since. Well, last time I saw a lot of them would have been Bow Wow, maybe Chiefs of Relief. So '80s, mid '80s was the last time I saw a lot of them, and then suddenly they're all on the internet again. So you know, kind of reconnected with them all, which was great. And but last 10 years, sort of Jordan's been knocking about and stuff. I saw her at Rebellion a couple of times. You know, she was just such a really nice person. You know.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people seem to like it, but I had much feedback from the Antz fans themselves, which kind of unnerves me. So,
yeah.
But it is what it is.
So you were following the Antz, Adam and the Antz, in the from 78 onwards.
I first saw them in 78. I wasn't there in 77. So the first part of the book is more of a collaborative effort with all of it. There's a few of the stories come from other people. So especially Duncan. Duncan should have written this book because he was there at the beginning, and he's got an absolutely fantastic memory. But I asked him, I said, do you want to do this? And he went, "Oh no." I think he was working at the time. Didn't have but you know, he's got such a fantastic memory for Adam and the Antz gigs. You know, so it's a bit of a collaborative effort. The first one, but all the gigs happened, and the stuff in the gigs happened.
Yeah,
you know, I tried writing the gigs that I wasn't there. I found it really difficult to write what other people might do in those situations.
Yeah.
So I remember it's talking to Duncan about it, and I talked to a couple of others, saying I'm struggling to write this as basically writing what other people might do when I don't know what other people might do, So then, so I had to put myself into the story at the gigs that I wasn't at. Just so as I was writing it in my head, it made more sense to me. I could, because the writing of the book was relatively easy. It just flowed from the minute I put the pen down to when I finished the book. I never had to sit there once and think about, well, how can I do this or how can I do that? It was all there. Within about, I don't know, a month, probably not even that long, probably a couple of weeks. It was just the problem was, when do I stop? Every time I read it, I remember I thought of something else I should have put in there. And end up I stopped reading it because it was getting bigger every time I read it. But yeah, I wish Duncan had wrote the first part, to be honest.
Yeah.
I was at some of the gigs, but I wasn't at them all.
But with Adam and the Antz, there are clear landmarks when the band changed. In Kings of the Wild Frontier, 1980.
Yeah, that's when it finished.
How did you perceive the band at that time? Sorry, Johna.
Well, I spoke about it in the first chapter of the first book. We'd all gone up there optimistic of the future. We'd seen the Antz Invasion tour. We knew that Adam needed to get a record contract out of it. They'd provided 3 new songs, which were all likable. So we were kind of optimistic that whatever new songs were going to come were going to be all right. But what we were confronted with was, it was like pop meets any old Morricone or something. It didn't sound great. It didn't infuse us at all. The audience had changed. And it's no disrespect to the people who turned up at that gig. Things had just changed by their own volition. I don't think Adam went around saying, I need a new audience, although it was widely believed by us that Falcon Stewart had wanted us out of the way. Just, if you look at it from the band perspective, on the Antz Invasion tour, they did a 15-day tour and there were 6 fully blown riots. So if you're trying to get your career off the ground, that kind of thing doesn't really help. There was more people following the band then than ever. There was tons of people following the band. When by the time we got to Liverpool, things had just changed. And for me, the bit that finished it for me was that bit where Adam stopped the gig. I can't remember what song they were playing, but it was about 4 or 5 songs in. And somebody made a mistake, and he just put his hands up and went, whoa, we're professional now. And I'm going, well, what have you been doing for the last 4 years? And he says, we can do better than this. And I thought, it just felt wrong. Yeah. I've never seen anybody do that ever, where you just stop the gig because somebody makes a bum note. But we didn't embarrass the individual. He kind of turned to his band and says, come on, we can do better than that. Adam wants to be more professional, understand that. You don't do it like that. And I think at that point, we all kind of just walked out. And that was the end of Adam and the Antz, and it felt like the end. That moment, just I didn't even have to go home and think about it. I mean, when they played Leeds, Mel and all them lot went over. Gary Ock and Mel went over and spoke to Adam, and he asked where I was at Leeds, and they just said, that's it, it's finished, it's gone. Yeah. I did go to Hull, but I got arrested for that. I didn't even go. Yeah, it just finished. Adam sent me a letter. I've still got it, 1981, and it says, "Thank you for your letter," which I'd never sent. But the letter was really nice and kind, and thanking me for following the band when nobody else did. And he didn't have to write that letter. Yeah. They were famous at that point. This is a year after the Antz Invasion thing. He didn't have to write it. It meant a lot that he did write it. So I think he cared, but he had to move on. I think McLaren, what McLaren did to probably had quite a big impact on him choosing to be a pop star. I think he wanted to do better than Malcolm, and that was probably the best way to do it. Be successful as a pop star rather than independent artist. I don't know. It's only my opinion, but that's what it felt like.
Did you? Because I know Barnsley followed Bye Why Why. Did you move over with Bye Why Why?
Well, we all did. I didn't go to every gig. He was on the coach with all the Antz crew. All the Antz crew went on that Bow Wow coach. Every time I went to Bow Wow, they never turned up. And there were loads of gigs. There were bloody Liverpool, Nottingham, Rock City. They didn't turn up. But even when they came to Bradford, they got there late. You know, and so we ended up just going to nightclub Panache in Bradford. And who was it in Bradford that night as well? The Cure. And I remember Robert Smith walking in. They'd just played the University that night. So, yeah, I did see Bow Wow quite a few times, but not as much as Barnsley. I mean, they were all on the coach bus. Chucker and Duncan and Martin and all them lot, they were all on the tour bus with them. So all them lot went across to Bow Wow. Obviously, there were Marsh and Dance as well. You know, we're all the original Antz fans. So, you know, a lot of people went to see Marsh and Dance, who were great in their own right. I don't think they were an Ant copyist band. I think they kind of complemented the Ants more than anything. But, you know, and that was another band. They had so much potential, and that went in no time as well. But then again, there was all the violence that followed Adam and the Ants, followed Marsh and Dance about, and that started with the gig which you're about to read in part 2 when Manufactured Romance supported him in Sheffield. And I was attacked by the Whittam punks because some guy had attacked one of their girls, and I remember seeing it. It happened right next to me, and he looked identical to me, and then just buggered off and left me. And at next minute, we're all fighting each other. So it all started from that. But there was a big feud between Marsh and Dance and the Whittam punks that went on for far too long, and silly, really.
But it kind of like everything seemed to calm down in the late 80s, you know, with the introduction of Acid House.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed it. I mean, when I first went, the first rave I went to, I think, was Hacienda. I went to see the Shaman. I think it might have been, I'm not sure if it would Drop, the first LP, or the second LP in Gorbachev We Trust, who I really like the Shaman, particularly the Drop LP. And after they'd finished, there was an house music party, phone party afterwards, and we kind of hung around for about an hour. And I thought, this is shite. So we went over to the Boardwalk, which I always preferred. I never liked the Hacienda. It was cold, unfriendly, and just grey. I always liked the Boardwalk across the road. And I went to a couple of other. I went to another one with a few Leeds fans that I knew had started getting into it. The music didn't do anything for me. When I started enjoying it, it was around about, I don't know, 1990, maybe 91, I can't remember. When all the Italian piano-y things and the techno songs, it sounded like punk rock version of disco music to me, or disco's version, with the hard elements, techno elements, and the screechy vocals and the fast pianos and stuff like that. Yeah, it sounded like a punk version of pop music.
Yeah.
It was very energising. I really enjoyed it. I was surprised I liked it. I didn't think I would like it. But I remember taking a knee, and I didn't even have a knee first time I liked it. And I just remember going off, and it had loads of punk rock elements to it. You know, there was loads of DIY aspects. It brought loads of people together that wouldn't naturally normally meet each other. It had a massive positive effect on the football lot. I remember being somewhere, it might have even been in Manchester, I'm not sure. I remember a group of Leeds fans and Man United fans were all lugging each other, and, you know, that wouldn't happen in a million years. You know, and all say, I hope your team do well tomorrow. And first game of the season, when Leeds got promoted back to the First Division in 91, I think it was, we played Everton away. And we'd all been to the warehouse, I think, in Leeds, raving. And we all had tickets for the Everton end because one of our friends had relatives there. So there were about 20 of us all crashed out in Everton seats, and these 20 Everton fans came and crashed next to us. And they'd all been out to the State in Liverpool, which was a famous club in Liverpool. And we were all sat there, we were all talking about house music, basically. And then this big numpty walked in, he was there, mate, a big Evertonian lad. And he's going, let's go sit down there. It's all Leeds fans are down there. It's going to kick off. And that one of these Evertonians turned down. Look, mate, football violence, it's finished. He said, these are all Leeds fans. We're all just chilling out, man, relax. And he just turned around and went, wankers, and just walked off. Neville Southgate sat in his goal complaining. Yeah, happy days. Enjoyed it.
So, which band did he follow? Any bands in the 90s?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I'd gone off at bands by that. I was talking to somebody the other day. We used to work at the Bradford University at that point. We were the security, so we used to escort all the bands on the stage, and we were like raving up to about 95, and then I got bored of it. So I wasn't interested in watching bands at that point. I remember on my birthday in 1991, Nirvana played Bradford University, and I had to escort them on stage. And Kurt came over and says, "Oh, yeah, you're an old punk rocker. I've heard it's your birthday. Do you fancy having a drink after the match?" I went, "Punk's dead, mate. I'm off out raving. See you later." I've still got my pass in there. And in retrospect, I wish I'd have sat down and had a chat with him, because he seemed a really nice, quiet lad. And he seemed very shy and insular. I didn't really like Nirvana. I just thought it was a racket, to be honest. It's really weird. I just remember him just crashing through an hour's set without stopping. But there's a clip on YouTube of him at Bradford University where he stops and talks to him and introduces the Teen Spirit single. Yeah. Even that sounded different live. That was, I couldn't differentiate between that and any of the other songs. It just sounded like a racket. But my ears had been turned away from bands at that point. I suppose Oasis's claim to fame, if they have any, is putting rock music back on the agenda.
Yeah.
Going back to there was another. I remember seeing in '84 we were watching Chiefs of the Leaf, which was part Adam and the Antz and Paul Cook at Sex Pistols. And when Uzi supported them, Stone Roses supported them. We saw them in 1984 at the Embassy Rooms. And I remember that gig because I don't know what happened. We got there early. And I don't know if somebody were handing out flyers for Stone Roses or something, but everybody was talking about them. So somebody was plugging them. And because usually in London, people usually just watch the band they've gone to see. Yeah, not everybody watches the support bands, but we all watched the Stone Roses, and I can still remember them I can still visualize them on stage. I can't remember who was who. There was one guy with a quiff and a cardigan and leather trousers and pointed brothel creepers. They looked like people of the time. So, a combination of punk rock, rockabilly and, goths. That's how I remember them looking. And we watched for about 10-15 minutes, and they were quite bad, so we just went back to the bar. But I think that was about their fourth or fifth gig and stuff.
Yeah.
But obviously they went on and when they came back in the end of the 80s, they looked nothing like the work that we saw. But fair play to them.
See, I moved to Manchester in '83, and I lived there for a year, and that's what got me away from punk rock. Really, I still knew some bands and followed them, but everybody listened to hip hop and electro and soul music. So slowly in that year, your musical taste started to change, and what you were saying about house music, hip hop was very DIY and do it yourself at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I because I have thought about it. It was kind of like when I was into punk. That's what people of the streets were listening to, and the same in Manchester. That's what the kids were listening to at that time: hip hop, soul, funk, electro.
We liked all that hip hop when it first came out, sort of like 1981, 82 in London. It was Bow Wow really, really, really kind of endorsed all that sound as well. Matthew, the Chiefs of the Leaf were a bit like, and they were doing it before Radio Speed, whatever they call them. I can't remember who did the hip hop rock crossover. I can't remember the name now.
Run DMC.
There were them, but there were another band. There were a metal band, weren't they, as well? Were it Rio, somebody of it. I don't think there was another band that were doing rock music and hip hop combined, and they want sort of hip hop guys. Can't remember the name now.
You had the Beastie Boys were doing that crossover punk.
I think it was a traditional rock band. So I can't remember the name of them. They were doing it around about the same time as Chiefs of the Leaf. I don't know who came first. But Matthew and all them lot really, and Duncan and that lot really loved all that hip hop. But we liked it all, the Grandmaster Flash and all that early stuff, because it was all really positive. You know, it was like black punk rock. They were singing about things that really mattered in their environments, and it all had a positive message. And then somehow we ended up with all this slap you bitch and get your AK-47 nonsense.
Yeah.
You know, and it's wanting into that part of it.
So you the 2 books you've written about Adam and the Ants. Is there a 3rd book? Do you think you'll do another one?
Yeah. What it is, for years, I've always managed to get. I've got absolutely loads of stories written down in maybe a page. They're not very well written. They're just basically a reminder of events that I can polish up later in the day. There must be I must have about 200 or 300 stories. There's loads of football ones. I'm a bit wary of going down the football route because those football hooligan books are shite. I mean, it's everyone's trying so hard to convince the reader that they're the hardest people in the world. That they actually, when you actually read them, they sound pathetic. Yeah. Nobody's Superman, I'm thinking, So I'm in my football stories. I've got a couple of stories in the Leeds Service Crew book. I didn't even want to get involved with that, but the money was going to go to went to the because it were all our friends who got attacked at Galatasaray. It was all the Leeds and the Bradford lads who got attacked, and they never got any money for the families. Well, they didn't even get any justice. So I got involved because they were trying to make some money for the families of people who had died. So that was the only reason that I contacted. But my stories weren't about fighting. I'll try to bring. The Man City one was probably the scariest day I ever had at football. That was well scary. Main Road, 1977. Probably the biggest casualty day we've ever had watching Leeds. But I try to put. There's no humour in them. All the camaraderie's taken out of it. All the humour. I mean, football's not just. How many people? I don't know. A lot of people did. I got involved in a lot of trouble at Leeds, and I think back on it now, and it just feels like what we were doing. We were like children going to football, and people were dying and getting maimed and stuff like that to watch sport. It sounds bizarre, but at the time it just felt normal because it was happening every week.
Yeah.
So I've got loads of funny stories about football. I must have about 50 of those, but I'm a bit wary about doing a football book. Even though the Adam and the Ants books read a bit like football hooligan books, to be honest. But I've tried to change the tone of it slightly. There's a possibility of a King Kurt book. The book company want me to do more stories, and I've got quite a few stories of gigs. Bow Wow gigs, Meteors, other band, Monochrome set. There's quite a lot of bands that I used to go watch. But King Kurt's a possibility. I mean, their gigs are absolutely fantastic. When I first started watching them in '82, I think I'd fallen out with Paul Fennicat at Meteors because I was going out with his ex-girlfriend, which caused a rift between us. All the original Meteors fans just ended up going to watch King Kurt. So what don't really want to talk about why we all fell out with Paul, but anyway. We're going to King Kurt, and they were just hilarious. They were like my best friends. I got closer to them more than any other band. We used to live together. We'd go out socialising together regularly. I even worked for them a couple of times, and we had so much fun. Absolutely, so much fun. I mean, it was every night. That would be an interesting book. I mean, they were rock and roll. I mean, they smashed the fuck. Didn't have any money to pay for it. You get all these rock and roll bands smashing up hotels and stuff like that, and the lawyer comes along and gets some bail. King Kurt were doing it. Didn't have a penny in the pocket. But,
I saw them once in '83 in Edinburgh at the nightclub.
All right.
And they were pretty riotous from memory.
I think they just brought fun. I never listened to King Kurt at home, ever. But I don't know why, the songs were great. Musically, they weren't anywhere near my favourite band. They were my favourite band as friends, and my favourite band for the amount of fun we had. I mean, it was just joy. And when I went to those first 101 gigs in Clapham in '82, I remember walking through the door. I had all seditionist clothes on, and somebody poured a bucket of glue all over me. And I went, "What the fuck are you doing, man?" And everyone ended up just laughing about it. And I thought, and then when they started playing gigs outside of London, I thought, this is gonna be, I'd expect, looking at my Adam and the Antz experience when we went on tour with Adam and the Antz and all the trouble we encountered, I'm thinking, imagine King Kurt turning up at some of these gigs and all these skinheads and other people turn up, want to confront you, and then we're throwing buckets of glue at them and fucking dead animals and shit like that. I thought, they're going to get murdered. And it never happened. I don't remember. The only gig I can remember where there was trouble was Birmingham. Again, Tin Can Club. And everyone just got it immediately. And it just, everybody thought it was just a laugh. And it was absolutely tremendous. I know they got a bit of trouble later on after I stopped going regularly, around about '84 or whatever it was. And Liverpool, I think they got attacked in a couple of other places. But yeah, I think I went to every King Kurt gig from '82 to '84, I think, except for one gig in Zurich, which I couldn't go to. But yeah, they were a joy. We had so much fun. And that would be an interesting book to write. I've got a load of King Kurt stories down. A couple of other people close to the band as well have hinted at maybe doing a book. There's another guy on Facebook who's actually written a King Kurt book, which kind of highlights their history from when they first started to when they finish. But there's no actual personal stories in there. So we were talking about maybe combining my personal stories with his factual. Well, it's all factual, but with his band information and band history or whatever, and interject it with. And plus, I know everybody else who's got a King Kurt. I'm sure there's a few other stories that other people could put up with. So that's a possibility, King Kurt.
Yeah. Thank you, Johna Johnson, author of Blood, Sweat, Leather and Tears. See you soon.
Thanks for having me on. Take care, man.